Here we go.
All righty.
Yep. Yep. All right. Hello, everyone. It's me, Jennifer from Little Metal Foxes. Hello. Hi. Hiya. We've got some good tool tips for you today because we had another great open studio session, which we love because we love working with the students. It's a great sort of like way to brainstorm stuff out. But sometimes the questions that come up make for great tool tips. And so this was one of those days. Because we were talking about going to like the gem shows and like the jewelry shows. And you know how, I mean, there's a lot of beads and stones and stuff that you might want to pick up. But um we all have those days when we're like, oh, I just need some findings. So let's talk about that. It's me, Jennifer from Little Mall Foxes,
Julia from Little Metal Foxes.
and we've also got
Helen from Little Metal Foxes.
hi from London. Yay. So boop, let's talk about it. All right. So one of the things that came up was organizing chain. So at the gem shows, it's really kind of nice because you can kind of get your hands on it and feel it. Or if you go to some place like a jewelry supply shop that has findings and chain, it's nice. It can be a little limiting because you don't know how much or what it is and things like that. If you're ordering it online, sometimes it comes back and you're like, well, that's a lot lighter than I thought it was going to be, or a little thin,
Or
or
narrow, yeah, smaller. Like it's
yeah,
so
It's too
hard
big.
yeah, and then
or
you're
too
like,
big. Yes.
yeah, too big. And it's like, do I send it back? Do I, get another
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell sometimes, just from if you don't have enough experience and you're trying to order, especially yardage, if you're ordering feet of chain, you really
Yeah.
are getting what you want, right? So sometimes those shows can be a great place to do that. Some places will offer like a sample piece, like a 1 inch piece of chain, so you can kind of like see what it is. And
Hmm. Like
um,
that you can take away with you. Like they'll just give you a little short piece.
yeah, so
Oh, that's cool.
one of the places that when at work we have a number of like sample pieces that came from, and this is Garland chains, and Garland
Ah, okay.
a lot of options. They have a lot of chains, and these are all samples of different chains. So I've got a nice little sample of gold field chain, and but when it's in the bag, I'm like, it's some of them. I was like, is there even chain in there? I'm like, oh yeah, that's just really. Can you guys see in the corner?
Currently
It's so
in the
tiny.
in the corner. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's really fine chain.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And so I can't even like, I almost threw the bag away because I didn't even realize there was anything in there. So I'm like,
Good Lord.
need to organize this stuff. So one of the and Helen, you order most of your chain finished. So you're
Yeah,
buying in links with findings on it, right?
A
correct.
clasp and a little ring. Yeah.
Yeah. Just
So
because, I could do it, but I don't do enough to, of anything to make it worth my time to make my own. So I just find it easier just to buy the pre-made and then it's one and done, you know.
right. And that really the advantage to that, I think, is that you've got thing you need when you need it and the length and size and done, and you can add your piece to it,
Hmm.
because if you know it's going to work together and you're all good, or if it's something you just want to make sure you're kind of selling it on something, it might be changed onto something else later. But
Right.
but
And that's all just standard stuff. That's like the limited I have stuff I have in stock. So I can like, here's the pen, match it with chain, off it goes.
yeah, right. So um I have a bunch of those that are that I use regularly that I will usually keep together.
Hmm.
So this is all the same necklace in the same length, but it's in 3 different bags from Rio. And so if it was in just a pile of stuff, I wouldn't
Right. You
recognize,
wouldn't know that it was all this that you had three of those chains already until you looked really closely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And it was like going through them and sorting them. So I always like clip them together so I know that
Hmm.
these are all the same chain.
It's a good plan because it's really easy. You know, like my husband does, he's a software engineer and he does the computer electronics things and he actually builds like, circuit boards. And
Yeah.
so he has like literally thousands of tiny little resistors and diodes and all of this kind of stuff. It's like it is really easy to end up ordering more because you aren't, he's got a vast inventory system. But even for us, jewelers who maybe have less of that stuff, it's still easy to reorder something you already have.
Right.
I have done it.
Yeah.
Spools
So
of wire in my case.
one of the things I will do with, and I don't have one of those boxes specifically over here, but
Mhm.
with a lot of my finding boxes, I will actually have like on the top a schematic of what's in the drawer. And
Mm,
that's one of the things they do like for hardware,
right,
just
right,
to have like a schematic on the top of the box that tells you what's in each drawer. And that way,
smart,
as each one of those little bins gets, narrowed down to nothing, you can
right,
go, okay, I've only got like a foot of that left, and I'm going to need another 10 feet of it to be able to do what I
right.
need to do. You've got the number right here to be able to reorder. So for stuff like that, a lot of times I'll keep it on little like embroidery cards.
Mm-hmm.
Find that that's kind of a great way to store it in these little boxes. Um, so I have like, a few of those of the brass that are in here that just kind of help keep it organized. Um, but with like gold fill and sterling, you have to be a little careful because it can tarnish in the bags.
Mm-hmm.
So what I
Even
will,
the gold fill will tarnish?
yeah, because it's brass with gold over it. So it does over time. Yeah, it'll tarnish.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't realize that. I thought that was kind of the whole point of gold fill was that it behaved more like gold.
it does. It does. Gold
More
plated.
like, but not exactly like, apparently.
So gold filled will tarnish over time. Sterling will tarnish over time, even if it's in the bag.
Yeah.
And what I will do a lot of times is just put one of those carbon anti-tarnish strips in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm not planning on using them regularly, I can, make sure that in storage
Yeah.
they're gonna stay airtight and tarnish free. So
Even if they're just in the bag. I mean, I have some little silver chains that I have had literally for decades, and they're fine because they're in a Ziploc bag. If they
yeah,
were loose in a tray or something,
yeah,
mm, especially in the fall when like it's less of an issue now because we have a heat pump, but in the past, in the fall, the heat would start to kick on and we had oil heat and there was enough sulfur in even in the biodiesel that all of my silver jewelry that was in the bathroom that was sitting on top of the jewelry box and had not been put away would get dark. And I'd be like, "God, I've been
Oh
here
wow, I hadn't
everything."
even thought about that.
huh,
Yeah. So for for those of us who live with oil heat,
yeah. Well, there are a lot of places all over the country that there's a lot of sulfur in the water, and you can like that that hard
I
water.
grew up on that.
the air.
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
So,
if you live near a paper mill, there's a lot of sulfur in the air.
yeah, exactly. So, finding ways to keep it all, organized so you know what you've got.
Hmm.
Um, and so that you can reorder when you need to reorder and know and
Right.
be able to feel it and all that. With one of the places that I used to go to here in Seattle that's no longer open was Fusion Beads. And what Fusion Beads would do is they had these laminated cards. Mine's not laminated, but they would have these laminated cards and they would have the information about the chain on there. And they would have holes punched, doop, 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 and have a little sample of the chain hanging down like that, right?
Nice.
So
Yeah.
then you could kind of see what it was, and on their card it would have, the size of the chain, what kind of finish it had, uh,
Hmm.
what the price was on it. So you could really sort of, lay out, all these chains and kind of really get a good sense of what their weight was, what they
Hmm.
felt like, how they were going to behave, and compare prices too.
Right.
So that was
Right.
really kind of nice. And they would divide them up by, like the brass chains like this.
Hmm.
These are from Vintage that they carried. But I also have one I'm in the process of filling right now that's got a sample of my gold filled chains, like some are from Rio, some are from Garland chains. But I have enough of these very inexpensive little lobster clasp that I put
Mm-hmm.
on here so that when I need to, if I need to take this off and, compare it to something and don't want the card to go with it, I can easily remove it from the card
Mm-hmm.
and kind of take it to whatever I need to do if I need to take it off, or if it just
That's
gets
smart.
not using it anymore. It makes it really easy to kind of uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
add it, take it off. But this is such a great way to just know, if I'm going to reorder, I've got all
Right.
my information right there, whose it is, what it's going to cost me, what the order number is, and all that information is kind of all in one place. So,
And that little card just lives in the box with the chain.
yep.
Yeah, because it's funny, the reorder information, you think, you think you're going to remember, which you do not ever. And
For more than like
and B, it's like it ends up, no matter what your filing system is, I used to keep all my receipts for a long time, and fairly recently I had an entire shelf of 3-ring binders of like paperwork from, decades of my business. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I do not need all these receipts. Now, once in a while, I really wish I still had them, but for precisely this, I want to look and see what did I pay for it. And so it's like, if you get in the habit of storing that cost information and reorder information with the materials,
yeah,
it's not a bad idea.
yeah. And if you're out of it, or you run down on stuff, and even if the box disappears and all the chain's gone, if you have a little like 1-inch
Hmm.
sample of those
Yeah.
chains, it's not taking up that much room. It's going to give you, again, down the road, if you're like, this one was like the 1.2 millimeter chain and it was just too thin, I
Hmm.
know that I'm going to need
Hmm.
to go up a size,
Right,
or
right,
really wish I had gone a lot heavier.
right.
So it gives you a way to really compare and contrast, what you've got. So love that. The other thing that's really helpful in terms of production organization, and I love this, is we would take our wire, and when we're measuring stuff, like if we're doing bracelets or necklaces or something, and we'd have a drop down measuring system that we could lay the chain on and make sure it was all cut to the same length at once. So we would just get it on there and compare it to the next chain and do our cut. But this is a really good way to store it, where it's just on a binding wire and like hanging it on a hook so that you can get
So
to
are
it.
those all loops of chain, or are those all individual pieces of
All
chain?
individual chains. So what I do at this point, because these are all kind of scrap bits, and I don't want to just throw them in something and get them all tangled, right?
Hmm.
So this is a way that keeps them from getting tangled. Uh,
Hmm.
I can just hang them all up, on a little ring, which keeps them all organized. And I've got about 5 different rings up there with 5 different chains. And
Okay.
so if I need a piece that's just, 16 inches long or 18 inches long, I've got, some of those on there. If I need something for a bracelet, I can, find a shorter one. Or if I need to just like clip off a piece, I can do that.
Hmm.
If I need a longer one, instead of like opening this up and taking them all off and putting them all back on again, what I can do is just clip them at the top, so I just have like a little sample at the top, but I can clip it to the length I need and not have to,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So anyway, I love organizing.
Nice.
It's really kind of fun to play with when you're bored.
Are
Um,
you ever bored in your studio, Jennifer? That is not an option.
Never distracted, but never bored. Um,
Distracted, but never bored.
Exactly. So, but this gives me a way to sort of organize the chain for, cutting it to the right length. What we will do a lot of times for production purposes is if we have, like, we're going to be making like, 50 necklaces at a time,
Hmm.
and they're all going to require the same chain and the same length, and we use that chain regularly, we can pre-cut and put them all on the wire like that, and then just count out, how many we need, slide them off, and, we're good to go.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to like and put it together and put it together and then, and going through that process in a much slower way. So, but this way you can, like make sure when you put them all on that they're all trimmed at the same length, and then off you go, right?
Right, right.
So, yeah,
Nice. Good plan.
yeah. So anyway, what are some of your tricks and tips for chain?
Are you talking to me?
You.
Um,
Yeah.
well, I'll tell you, when it comes to cleaning chain, I have very strong opinions. Mostly because the chain I make is they're butted
Handmade.
links, right?
Yeah.
So here I'll grab this, which is a chain I'm working on right now, and to show you. So this chain, this is all square. It's a square Byzantine chain,
Oh,
right? But it's graduated. And so it's going from like 12 gauge links down to 22 gauge. Yeah.
right.
And these are cold connected. So if you pull on this chain, the weakest link, the little tiny ones are the ones that are going to give up. So when you're cleaning this, you have to be really careful not to be like and hauling on it and pulling on it, because if you do, it's always the weak ones that are going to give up on you. So I people often ask me about cleaning, and because you want a chain like this is a classic example because it's so got so much sparkle to it. You want it to stay bright. You don't want it to get antiqued. So what I recommend people use, don't use dips. Never use dips because they're really hard on your chain. They'll actually etch it.
But that
Um,
on your silver, really.
they're really bad for your silver. They'll etch the surface and pit it and make it actually more prone to tarnish. And Tarnex will do exactly the same thing. Tarnex is in the business of selling Tarnex, and so they're fine with you pitting your silver because then it'll tarnish more quickly and you'll have to use more Tarnex.
Hmm.
But don't, because it's also really toxic stuff. Uh, and don't use the aluminum foil and baking soda thing because it does the same thing. So what you want is one of the cream type, like Twinkle or Wright's silver polish. You usually can get them at like the supermarket, right? So you want the cream kind that comes with a sponge, and then you dip the sponge in it, and you make a foam in the sponge, and then you basically just squeeze the foam through the piece. So you're not pulling on it. You're basically using the sponge and kind of working the foam through the individual links. So that's what I do. The other thing I do is tumble them when I finish this, for example, to get it all shiny, I'll tumble it. And when
Right.
I put them in there to tumble them, I always hook them, right? So I always hook the two ends of the chain together because they're much less likely to get tangled if it's a full circle,
Yeah.
right? It's been my experience. I don't
With
actually like for very fine chain. These are not very fine chains. For very fine chains, if you're going to tumble them, you need to do like what you're doing with the binding wire, where you kind of loop up loops and you kind of, you kind of make a little kind of caterpillar out of it, little Loch Ness monster thing, loops on the wire so that no individual loop is long enough that it can kind of tangle with anything else. But
right.
you loop, you kind of hook through one link and then, 6 inches further along another link and then so on and so forth and then twist it together. And then that way it can tumble without tangling.
Yeah.
Because cleaning chain,
I've seen people use like a credit
There's a
card
disc.
size
Yeah.
or what?
There's a disc now that people are making 3D printed that
oh,
you crisscross the chain and throw it in your tumbler. It's really handy.
that
Yeah.
makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
But
The tumbler I have is actually a vibratory tumbler, so it's a Taurus. And so I couldn't probably put one of those things in there because it wouldn't fit, right? Because it's basically a donut shape. But if you have a tumbler, like a pin finisher or something that is more of a single unit, then yeah, that would work.
yeah. For using like the credit card style way, especially with fine chain, you can like punch a couple of holes in, a little card size plastic and then just thread it through the holes and
And
then
then join the ends.
match
Yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah.
then
Yeah.
throw it. And you
Yeah.
can do multiple chains that way, at a
Mhm.
time. You don't have to,
So
and then
smart.
gold and everything else. We've had, I mean, if it's more than, an inch or two of chain, you're going to
It
come
will
out,
tangle.
you're going to come out with knots. Yeah.
You're going to come out with knots. And that's actually really can be really hard on the chain because the knots themselves can, depending on the chain, I've picked open chains that we've all done that, right?
Yeah.
Get out your needles, pair of needles, and like gradually work them apart. But it can, because people, as they're pulling on them to try to get it out, they'll actually stress and can bend the links and damage the links. So
Yeah,
don't do
I've
that.
seen people actually like, especially with like sterling fine chain, they'll do that, and it ends up actually stretching the chain, And I've seen some sterling chain that has stretched, or fine chain, including gold fill and sterling, like the 1 millimeter curve, but it's so pretty and delicate. And I've had people, come back at the place that I work, and they had like an 18-inch chain, and it's almost 22, 24 inches, because it's just been pulled and pulled and pulled so many times that suddenly it's gone boop to here. And they're like, I thought this was shorter. And you look at it and you can see the links have been like, and it pulled
They are no longer round, they are paperclip.
well, not even paperclip. They're almost like, like staple, because they've been pulled.
Ouch.
So, but that does happen when you're trying to like loosen chain and
Yeah.
part, you can stretch and break those links pretty easily.
Yeah.
So so having
But don't.
you can keep it all organized and not let it like wrap around on itself. I've seen people use things like spools and just something that you can kind of wrap it around and close it so it doesn't come off. Plastic embroidery cards as well.
And just for finished necklaces, I recently saw something on, I think it was Instagram, where they were using buttons for earrings, but I was like, oh, you could actually do that if the holes are big enough for your necklaces to keep them from tangling too much. So
yeah.
The thread, you mean thread the
thread the
chain
holes
through the holes in the necklace, in the bead. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I've seen old spools of like, cotton, spools, where you can like, stick the chain through and wind it around and stick it through the other end and close it again. Just
one thing that if you have these, and I don't think you necessarily want to do this with your chain so much, but they do come apart. And so
I didn't know they came apart.
The Guterman's ones do. So then you could potentially, like if you put like a little buffer, you could probably, put one end, as long as you're not squeezing down hard on your chain, or if you just have an empty spool, then you can just indent it or something.
Storage.
Yeah, you can put, can't put anything in there, but because it's hollow on the other side. But so when you have it and you haven't finished the spool, you put the end of the thread.
Right. Because it gets caught in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Never knew that they were two parts, Helen. The things you learn on Tooltip Tuesdays.
We've learned something today. It's awesome.
We always learn things.
Yeah. So yeah, let's please in the comments below, if you've got chain organization thing that you do that could help others, or you've got like a great idea about how you go about tumbling or storing, sorting, all that stuff with your chain,
let us know.
Yeah, because there have been some really interesting practical solutions that you're like, oh, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. Just to keep things organized and straight. So chain's a pain,
Chain's a pain.
It's pain.
You want to keep it, it's keeping it from getting tangled is orders of magnitude better than having to untangle it.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Wendy Shaw says chains on safety pins, the large safety pins.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you've got like multiple, same necklaces like that. And
or like your thing you were just doing with the binding wire. Use a large safety pin for that instead of
the loop. Yeah.
Yeah, this is too fine.
Too fine to put a safety pin. You'd have to have a little thin wire. Yeah.
Yeah. But for a finished chain, I could do that because I could put it through the jumper. Yeah. But yeah, for some chain that's a really good solution. Safety pin.
Yep.
Good thinking, Wendy. I love it. Thank you. See, I love
tool tips. See, I know. Tool tips. Yay, Wendy. Thank you.
Gold ones. That would be good. And they're so fine. These delicate little safety pins. They're like brass or something. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, the tiny ones. Once you get with dry cleaning sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for your great tool tips on organizing chain. Please hit the like button and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when we're live, and you can join us, pitch in your comments and questions so that we can discuss. There you go.
this
All right.
time.
Yeah.
We will be back next week with Tool Tip Tuesday, and hope you join us here and on Instagram as well. So, yeah. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you later.